Hi, everybody. This is your teacher, Mr. Gould. I'm sitting here putting together this presentation on the French Revolution. Hopefully you'll listen to it. Hopefully you'll like it. I am sitting at the couch in my house listening to my English bulldog sit next to me and snore. So if you hear that, my apologies. Now let's get down to business. The French Revolution is from 1789 to 1799. Now, that's a general date, but it was a process, and it really happened in like 3 stages. So everything that you see here on this first slide, and like every other slide, please take the time to write down. If you have to go back, just go back. It's totally cool. Now, this is a famous painting from the French Revolution. It's Lady Liberté. I wanted to French that up a little bit. Lady Liberty leading the masses forward. All right, it's kind of famous. Now, in 1789, France is poor. I mean, very, very poor. Louis XVI, he's spent too much money, and he has these lavish parties. And the people are starving in Paris. I don't know how to phrase it, but there were a lot of hooligans in the street. There were riots. There were bread riots. There were people, like, just good, decent people who were resorting to stealing because they had no money to feed their children. Now, Louis, by the way, that's Louis the 16th, Louis XVI, calls the Estates General to raise taxes. Now, the Estates General is not like a fancy name for some guy who was a general. I mean, the name Estates would be a silly name. So the Estates General was really their name for like their parliament or Congress. And the States General is set up in an interesting way. There's 3 estates. There's the first estate, which is the clergy. There's the second estate, which is like the upper class nobility. And then there's the third estate, which is known as the bourgeois, but it's really the middle class. And like we talked about when we broke down the Enlightenment, the middle class really controls every society. And the middle class was unhappy. Not to mention the middle class made up about 90% of the population. And they basically had 1 vote in the Estates General. So if you think about it this way, if every estate has 1 vote, the nobility has a vote, the clergy has a vote, and then the third estate has a vote. Who's going to get their taxes raised? Well, the clergy and the nobility, first and second estate, they're always kind of connected to each other. All right, they're the old regime, it's called. All right, they're the old guard. The third estate is that bulk of the population, and they're always going to get taxes raised. And nobody really has any money. Now, the third estate gets together, and they basically, they barricade themselves into an indoor tennis court. Now, we really don't have indoor tennis courts anymore. Really, they're hard to find. If you've ever seen like a racquetball court, it's a little bigger than a racquetball court. But they all go in. Now, these are representatives from every district throughout France. All right, there's hundreds of people in this little tennis court, and they declare an oath that they're not going to leave until they break down a constitution. There in the middle is a guy named Robespierre. He's going to be the head of this estate. Now, the third estate form a new government and demand the king to sign a constitution. But the king, he was been an absolute monarch his whole life. He came to power in 1775. He had no idea that he would ever have this happen to him. He's in a little bit of shock. And Louis XVI, he wasn't an enlightened monarch. He said no. And people got a bit upset. As you can imagine, they don't have any money. Louis XVI is trying to encourage them to give up whatever they can afford. So what? So he can have lavish parties and spend it where it shouldn't be spent? So, although this guy, John Locke, has been dead since 1704, he'll inspire the French in 1789. And John Locke, when he died at like the age of 72 in 1704, he probably never even thought that a bunch of Frenchmen would use his ideas of natural rights to form some new government. By the way, John Locke's English. Now, on July 14th, 1789, the storming of the Bastille occurs. Now, the Bastille is an interesting backstory. It was a prison where the French monarchy put all the political prisoners. It was also an arsenal. It was also a place where they held a lot of the munitions that would be used by the police and the general guard of the city of Paris. So basically, you've got a building holding prisoners who hate the government and holding all of the government's weapons. So when this Bastille is stormed by the people, they break into the weapons area, they take all the weapons, the guards, basically they're bourgeois, they're middle class, they're third estate, they pretty much just open the doors for them. They set it on fire, take the prisoners out, who for most part were their friends, and they storm the city, and they're armed citizens outside the city, or excuse me, throughout the city, outside the royal palace, which is the current day Louvre. And this Bastille and the Louvre, geographically, are about as far away as Hewitt's Market in Berlin and the high school. So not really that far in the big scheme of things. Now, in 1789, by the way, this is just a little breakdown. 1789 to 1793, King Louis XVI is going to be killed. Now, that's going to happen in 1793. He's going to be beheaded. His wife, Marie Antoinette, was beheaded after him. Now, this is the first time like a monarch has been killed in this manner. Public execution. There have been some assassinations in the past, but a public execution. He was put on trial. He was jailed, and then he was beheaded. Now, from 1793 to 1795 is what we're going to talk about next. And that's the Committee of Public Safety is in charge. Now, the Committee of Public Safety sounds like it's looking out for the people, but the Committee of Public Safety was definitely not looking out for the people, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. And then 1795 to 1799, that's the rule of the Directory, and we'll go over that briefly. Now, the Committee of Public Safety had a leader, and that leader was this guy named Maximilien Robespierre. He was a Jacobin. The Jacobins were a radical political party who wanted all monarchy or anything related to nobility gone, and the only way to kill them would be to execute them. So they rounded this group. They rounded out rounded up this group called the Girondinists, and I say it that way. You're going to hear it said as Girondists and a bunch of other things, just like the Jacobins. You might have heard them last year if you had Mr. Fisher's class as Jacobins. It doesn't really matter. But Robespierre is going to actually be beheaded in the end. And you guys are going to hear about this in class because I love seeing kids' faces when I tell you about the death of Robespierre. But he's going to lead the Committee of Public Safety. Now, this is the time period that the guillotine was heavily used. Now, it's guillotine. I've heard a couple of different phrases for it. It's a fancy French word for a machine that cuts off your head. It was heavily used during this period, and the Girondists were killed. All right, there were thousands and thousands of executions a month, sometimes 100 a day, and they were in this main square right in the middle of Paris. So people came out as if it was, the fair was coming to town. All right, it was almost like a festive occasion. Now, after the Committee of Public Safety, a group, which was an oligarchy, though that's oligarchy, Oligarghy. An oligarchy is a small group that rules, and the Committee of Public Safety was a really large group, but after them there'll be a smaller group called an oligarchy. And at first there's going to be 7 members, and then there's going to be 5 in this oligarchy, then eventually 3. And this is called the Directory, or La Directoire, if you want to say it in French, maybe impress your friends. Now, the oligarchy, the Directory, is also a group of people like Robespierre, people that were looking maybe for some revenge. They failed too. So ultimately, what's next? Well, you've got some different groups here. You've got the group, the Jacobins still exist, which were pretty much a group of what's known as sans culottes, which literally means without fancy pants. We'll talk a little bit about that. But what's next is going to be maybe somebody from the outside, somebody who doesn't have any of these like early French Revolution. I don't know how to say it, but these early grudges, really, these early Revolution grudges. And that guy is going to be this guy who is Napoleon Bonaparte. And he will be someone we are going to spend some time going over. So, this is your brief introduction to the French Revolution. I hope you've enjoyed it. Feel free to rewind this. Hopefully this 10 minutes hasn't been a waste of your time. And I look forward to going over it in class. Take care.